All right, well, we'll get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucer. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of our Teaching and Learning Center, and you have found our way to our weekly professional development series. We will begin this week, as we always do, with a land acknowledgement.
All right, Don, just give me a thumbs up whenever you see what I want you to see. Okay, cool. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilized the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism, and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. A couple of announcements. Number one, if you're with us today, you probably are aware that we do this weekly in real time over the entire academic year for our professional development series. We only have 2 more weeks of the semester, so only 2 more of these real-time meetings. Next week, we're going to have Pradeep Malreddy talking about exam blueprints. I'll get to today's event here in just a second. But if you've attended enough of these over the course of the academic year, you can earn a professional development certificate or potentially even become a TLC fellow. The information for how to do that is available at a link that my colleagues just dropped into the chat, also available on our website. I will kind of let you know that if this is something you're wanting to do, the deadline for those things is May 30th. So that is coming up. We've got a little bit of time till then, but time goes a lot faster than I think it will sometimes. So if you're looking to do that, I would recommend getting on that. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'll also let you know that our 4th annual SOTL Showcase is going to be Monday, May 12th. That's the Monday of finals week from 1:30 to 4:30 in Hale Library 181. We've got a wonderful slate of oral presentations and poster presentations that we are putting together, so you're not going to want to miss that. It's going to be awesome. Also remind you that our event today and our events all throughout the year have been archived on our webpage, so you can watch them asynchronously. So if you're here today and say, wow, my colleagues need to know what Dr. Hock is up to, well, you're going to be able to share that with them a little bit later this afternoon. So without further ado, I want to introduce today's guest. Today's guest is Dr. Gaea Hock, and she's going to be talking about what are we supposed to do given effective directions to enhance student learning. Dr. Hock, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. I have a small PowerPoint. I'll get it started here. A little bit of a lag. Are you seeing my PowerPoint?
We're seeing it now.
Are you seeing the display setting or the?
We're seeing presenter view.
There, does that look better?
Yes, yes, it does.
The dual monitors, you always have to like navigate things here.
Understood.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It was nice to be asked to contribute to this professional development series and to hopefully share some tips and advice that I've gathered over my years as an educator. So just to give a little bit more background on me and my career path is that I am a K-State alum. I graduated from K-State in 2003 with a bachelor's in agricultural education. Went on to start teaching high school agriculture about an hour south of here at Center High School, very small 1A, loved it. And while I was there, I worked on my master's in curriculum and instruction and got that done. And then the opportunity came to move after 6 years in the high school classroom into a graduate program at Texas Tech University and finished up there with my PhD in agricultural education and communications, and then spent a few years at Mississippi State before returning home to my alma mater. And this is year 9 So if I add all my years up, it's 22 years as an educator, and it has been a blessing to return home to Kansas and be able to continue to work. So my day job is preparing teachers. So I teach this lesson very often, and I remind my future educators and my in-service teachers these tips and strategies as well. So to get us started today, for those of you that are here with me live, I'd love for you to just participate in a small activity. So if you'll get out a sheet of paper or flip over your notebook or something just to write on. You just need a blank sheet of notebook paper or sketch paper, and I'm just going to have you listen and follow the directions. All right. Start by drawing a large square in the center left of your page. Inside that square, toward the upper right area, draw a small circle about the size of a quarter. Below the square, draw a horizontal rectangle about the same width as the square, but only about 1 inch tall. Beneath the rectangle, draw 2 short horizontal lines. Now move to the right of your paper and draw a square. At the top right corner, draw an equilateral triangle pointing upward. Directly below that triangle, draw a vertical rectangle, and then draw a vertical rectangle, and then draw a half circle below that. Okay, how did we do? Did we get all of it? Does it look perfect? Who's brave to show the camera your drawing? Okay, we have one brave soul, good. How'd everybody else's look? Okay, so we have some shapes on some paper, good. Let's see how close you got to what it should have looked like. So it should have looked like this. Why did your papers not do this? I gave you the directions. I read them to you. Why did your papers not all look exactly like this?
I didn't quite know what you meant with the directions.
Okay, good. What else? What else challenged you to get it just to be perfect like this one?
I think maybe the speed of the instructions.
Yep, good, good. Cindy, what could I have done to make your picture look more similar to this one?
Instructions that provide reference to other things already on the page.
Good. So others on the call, anybody else want to contribute? What's something that I should have done that would have got your image to look more like this one?
It was so quick. Maybe I had to listen more carefully, and then I started to think of that, or maybe have like more measurable quantities, some information.
Yes, good. Good. So here's the directions that I was using, but I didn't tell you everything. I was like, I'm not going to give them all these details. I'm going to just tell them it quickly. So sometimes as a teacher, we know what we want it to look like at the end. Why can't our students just figure it out? So today, hopefully by the end of our time together, we have learned some tips and strategies to help your students complete that image, that assignment, that activity closer to how you envisioned it be. So shout out to ChatGPT who helped me write these directions. Want to give it full credit. So here's the objectives for our time together is just to discuss the importance of effective directions. Why should we spend this time together today talking about it? I'm going to describe 5 elements to designing and delivering effective directions, as well as what this idea of brain before body means. And then I'm going to put you guys that are here live on the spot, but also those that might watch this later to really challenge you to let's practice writing and delivering a set of effective directions. So why are good directions important? So in the chat box, if you'll just drop in there, why do you believe that good directions are important. I'll just tell you they are. So why are they important? Good. Set students up for success. Allow students to demonstrate their learning fully. Yep. Yes. Reach the intended goal to achieve that common goal. Good. So you've hit on several of them. I talk to my future educators as a way that it really does help to communicate your expectations. What are your expectations for that task, that assignment, that activity, so that they are meeting those expectations? And a lot of our students struggle with some vagueness, and so providing some clarity on those expectations is important. And that goes into that second one. It's very clear. What do you want them to do? How do you want them to do it? And then there are opportunities for some creative thinking, but providing them that guidance on, we want you to be more creative in this adventure. It provides structure and order so that your classes can finish on time, that assignments are handed in appropriately, and hopefully your grading is much easier when they're more structured in order in how they're supposed to do things. It also facilitates active learning. Remember, I'm training, for the most part, high school teachers. And so I want them using strategies and techniques that are more active, going out to a lab space, going on field trips, doing class demonstrations, using the greenhouse or a welding shop. So doing things more active, and we have to provide some good directions before we go into those spaces. But also just regular assignments need good directions. And then finally, it encourages engagement. So hopefully through good directions, that active learning is happening and they're more engaged and the classroom environment is more positive. So good. I want to quickly go through how I teach the characteristics of effective teachers, just to lay the groundwork on, if you're not coming from a space where you were trained as an educator, maybe these 5 things will help you think about, okay, if I'm doing these well, now I'm refining my directions, you're going to be able to really be an effective educator. So I teach my students something called CVEST. So clarity of your assignments, your directions, how your course is laid out on Canvas, any of the LMS that you might be using besides Canvas. But having that very clear, like what is graded, what is for a class activity that might just be for participation points. Variability, changing up what you teach. And I struggle with this as a college professor. I mostly teach lecture style. I'm in front of a screen, an LCD projector, a big TV screen, but there are ways for us to vary how we're teaching. So if you guys will drop in the chat, how do you vary how you are teaching the content that you're teaching? What are some examples of ways that you're providing variety? Good. Some visual content discussion, having that active learning, group discussions and activities is perfect. Yes. Yeah, doing polls, small group conversations, using technology to help do that. So good. So even if we're stuck kind of more in a direct instruction route in our classroom settings here on campus, we can also be modeling and using some variety. So hands-on activity, good. The third one is enthusiasm. And this is one of those things where, some teachers come at it very enthusiastic. They love their content. They love being in front of a classroom. It's edutainment. Some teachers may struggle with this, but how you show your enthusiasm can vary. As long as your students can help to recognize they find this content exciting or innovative, or they're passionate about what they're teaching, that usually relates to students considering you a very effective teacher. The last two are kind of long-winded. Student opportunity to learn criterion material. I talk to students like, what are the learning objectives? What is it you hope that your students learn when they leave that learning experience? Whether it's 50 minutes via Zoom and a TLC presentation, I gave you what my objectives are for our time, or a longer period of time. So think about that. And is the directions and those activities that you're going to be giving helping to relate back to those learning objectives? And then task-oriented behaviors, staying on task, getting things done, making full use of their time. Students may say they like it when a teacher ends class early, but I would hope that we're all teaching to the bell and making the full use of our time with them and being very much on time, on task during that entire class period. So I just wanted to preface, a lot of this comes back to how I teach my future educators in terms of the CBEST characteristics. The other thing I want to preface today before we dive in is I am only going to really focus on how we give oral directions, but please know that that relates to how we give written directions. So I want you to read this example of a written direction. And did the student follow the directions? So I like to use this one, and you can see there it's a younger age, but they did rewrite each word by the alphabetical order it comes in the alphabet, but not the way that the teacher intended them to do it. So hopefully you can see how they did it versus how probably the teacher wanted them to do it. And every year I have an assignment where a student went kind of rogue on me and I was like, oops, and I have to go back in and edit my written directions again. So please know today I'm going to focus more on oral directions, but your written directions are also very important and should hopefully what we talk about today influence how you handle those. Okay. Yeah, so let's dive in. What are the 5 elements to design and to deliver an effective set of directions? So these are the 5 that I'm going to focus on. I'm going to move by there. If you can build these into your direction set, you're going to be far and above, your peers. So we don't want to just jump right in and tell them what we're doing. We want to give them a preface, like when I say go, or in a few moments, in 30 seconds. And then you'll say, is it everyone? Is it this half? Is it the front 2 rows? Who is involved in this set of directions? And then the directions, I'll give it a few more details here in just a minute, but it's specific, it's succinct, it's just what they need to do to complete that task, that next set. Man, put them on the overhead, put them on the flip charts, on your computer screen. I build them into my PowerPoints as much as possible to where it's a visual cue and reminder, not just an oral cue for them to know what they need to do. So I'm going to dive into the directions and what all is included in that one little piece here in just a minute. And then we want to check, what questions do you have? Not, are there any questions? So I want you to think about, if you haven't heard the difference between those 2 questions, what questions do you have? Opens it up knowing there's probably a question out there. There's something I need to clarify. Somebody's confused. Are there any questions? Puts people on the spot to being like, oh, that person wasn't listening, or that person didn't understand. And kind of not allowing them to just be open on, hey, I'm confused. Where are we supposed to go when we finish? Or how long do we have to complete this task? So if you can change that verbiage, if that's the one thing you take away from today, that'll be awesome. And then the action is just a go, begin, engage. This goes back to personality. Some teachers are very creative with their word choice and what they might do. And I usually say, okay, let's get started. And we get going. So I want you to think about these 5 elements. You're going to give them a time, something to think about. We're not doing it right now. In just a moment, I want you to listen to the directions. I don't want you to already be moving to the next thing. And then who's involved? Give them the directions, what you want them to do. Ask that, what questions are there? Sometimes it's what can I clarify? And then you call forth to action. So let's dive into what all is included in that set of directions. That's what you came here to hear me talk about today. And we're finally to that piece. I can get my cursor going. There we go. So the first part of it is setting the context. And I'm big on this with just lesson design. Why are you asking them to do what you're asking them to do? You know, we are going to practice writing some directions today so that you have one good set of directions to use as a modeling. That's my context for what I'm going to ask you guys to do here in just a little bit. The cognitive task is, what are you wanting them to think about? Think about what we just talked about. Think about those 5 key things that you need to consider, those 5 elements to design and delivering a good set of directions. Action verbs would be write, discuss, describe. We're going to focus on action verbs more than understand. It's really hard to measure if a student understands something, but if you ask them to write 3 things that they took from today's lesson, that's the action verb. Logistical directions, it just kind of depends on your activity. Are you going to have them physically up and moving? Are you wanting them to use a device? Is there certain roles in the group? If it's a group, like is somebody the recorder? Is somebody the presenter? Is somebody the fact checker? What are some of those logistical things that you might need to tell them? That signal word, that statement, the sound or the motion. Sometimes it's when I start the music. When you start hearing the music, you can move and get started. So those type of details you can think about when you do your directions. But wait, there's more, okay? We're also going to give them a time frame. And I'm going to hit this again at the end, but always give them less amount of time than you think it's going to take. And this is the hardest part. Those of us that have been teaching for a long time, my students that are learning to teach, they're like, how do you know how much time this will take? And I'm like, well, you just have to make an estimated guess. And as you teach it, you'll learn how much time do they really need. And so when we think about the time frame, I usually start with a shorter amount of time, like 3 minutes. And then if they need more time, I'm the gracious teacher that's going to gift them this time. Who needs 2 more minutes to finish? Instead of giving them 5 minutes when they only needed 3, and now they're sitting around checking Facebook or Instagram or playing on Snapchat or whatever. So if you can shrink that time and then gift them more, they'll thank you that you're really doing them a favor. The check for understanding is really important. That's where, how many sentences do you need to have? How many group members should be in your group? What are the key things that you need to grab when you come to the front to get your materials? So you're going to check for understanding. You're going to make sure that they understood you, but they're also helping make sure everybody else is on the same track. What to do when done? I'm training students that are going to go teach junior high, high school kids. It's really important. We don't want to give them any extra free time. What to do when they're done? Do they return to their seats? Do they bring their materials back? Do they close their book or their laptop to indicate that they're finished? Something to indicate that to you. One of my hardest things to do is this 4th one on this list is standing still. Like even not using my hands too much, just try to stand still when you give those directions so that you're anchored in one spot and they're focused on you. And when you're done giving the directions and they start working, then you can start moving and checking. And then using supporting nonverbals, like we need 3 things. You're going to move over to this corner, come to the front to get your supplies, whatever the nonverbal might be. So I'm going to back up and just let you revisit those first few. So these are the set the context. Why are you asking them to do what you're about to ask them to do? What do you want them thinking about? What is it they're going to do, that action verb? Where are they doing it? What do they need to do it? What cue are you going to give them to get started? How long? A quick check for understanding. What questions are there? What can I clarify? When you finish, you should do this. Try to stand still and use those nonverbals. All right, so before I turn us loose to do a little practice, here are just a few more tips I have. These are words that you should be using as you teach. So first is using student names. And I know that that varies depending on the type and type of class you're teaching and the number of students that are in there, how often you might see them. But man, if you could use student names, that really will drive home that you're focused on them and their individual learning. These are some other, we've already talked about what questions are there, but let's. Let's is an inclusive, not you are, but let's do this. Let's get started is also an inclusive. Who will tell me, you know, if you want to check for understanding, who will tell me how many minutes you have to work on this? And they might contribute that information. You know, focus your attention here. We, that inclusive language, using an action verb. Here's some others, you know, think about, we want to engage that cognitive muscle. When you hear go, we will. So these are just some words that I try to incorporate into my own teaching and pedagogy and hopefully model for my students that I want them thinking about these words. So I'm going to show you words to try to limit, to try to edit out of your vocabulary as you give directions. We have to be careful, and you know, I've taught long enough now, I've seen some generational changes, but if we can avoid telling them what to do, but in saying like, let's get started, we're gonna do this, instead of I need you to do this, or I want you to do this. Don't forget to do your homework. If we could just swap it to remember your homework is due tonight at midnight, and then they're remembering it's due instead of not forgetting that it's, you know, and then when is it due? And then you can see there's some other things. These are just small things to help us be more inclusive as we teach. And then one of the hardest ones that I always have to like catch myself on is I'll have a student contribute something really good or ask me a question and they're real soft, and I'll have to like ask them just to repeat it again, because I want to give ownership to their voice, to their question, and hopefully encourage a classroom where students are open to sharing. So I try not to repeat their response. I try to have them share it on behalf of themselves. All right, so we're going to now practice. So I'm going to put, some of you are going to be like, this is really uncomfortable. That's okay. We're here together. We're going to support each other. And those that watch this later, I hope you challenge yourself to do this as well. So I want you to think about a previous lesson that you taught this week, or maybe one you have coming up in the next couple of days. Think about an activity that you're going to ask your students to do. Something, it could be something very small. It could be also something a little bit more big, depending on how much you want to do here. When I say write, you're going to write out the directions meeting the guidelines we've discussed so far today. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to work on this. What questions are there? Ashley, if you'll hold up your fingers, how many minutes am I giving you guys to work on this? 3 minutes, that's correct. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. And I really am going to give you guys 3 minutes. All right, right. You have 1 more minute to wrap those up. Okay, does anyone need about 15 more seconds? All right. Go about 15 more seconds here. Finish your thought. Okay. So for part 2 of this, we're going to practice. In 30 seconds, you're going to practice giving your directions. There are so few of us on the call today, so I'm going to put everyone on the spot who's willing to share it, unmute yourself and share it. You're going to critique your own directions. We might catch something that you say, and I might add like, hey, think about this as well. And then we're going to take about 4 minutes here just to have us all share those directions. What questions are there? All right, we're going to start with a volunteer. Who would like to kick us off? All right, Dawn is willing and able. Go ahead.
I'm at least willing. We'll see how it goes. So when I say go, we'll get into small groups of 2 to 3 people. Each small group will write a list of the 3 biggest risks that come from using humor. We will each have 30 seconds to write our lists. We will do this to better understand the social impacts and consequences of humor. We will then share out our responses. What questions do you have? All right, go.
Yeah, good. I think with that many directions, you could say how many things do you want to ask, just to bring them back to being like, okay, how many? And then
Okay.
did you say how they were going to get into their groups?
No, I said just groups of 2 to 3 people.
Good. Okay, good. So you told them how many people and how much time. So good. All right. Thanks for sharing. All right.
No,
who's
thank you.
next?
I can go next if
Great. Thanks, Andy.
we have a small group activity to work with our new concepts that we've just been going over. I will call out your name and instruct you where to go to work with your group after I've given the instructions. So everybody sit tight until all the groups have been called. So up on the board, you can see the instructions. In your small group, you will discuss questions 1 through 3 as a group. Come to a consensus. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes or so, and then send one group member to write your group responses on the board. When your group member is writing on the board, everybody else in the group needs to take notes of the responses that are going up from the other groups. What questions do you have? Okay, so here are groups. Group 1, you're going to meet over here by the door. And then I would give the names. Group 2, you're going to meet over by the window, etc. Everybody in a group, did I miss anyone? Okay, great. Go ahead and find your groups and get started.
Good. All right. So quick critique is maybe like right before you say, okay, now get started. Okay, how long do you have? Just to remind them one more time, and then that second task. Your directions are long enough. You might want to do something like I did and just divide it into 2. Let them go discuss for 5 minutes and then say, okay, your 5 minutes are now up. Designate someone that's going to come to the front and write. That would be my only, like, just to help them. I don't know what age, like, are these like freshmen,
College.
like freshman college students?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, breaking that up, I think having them focus just on that conversation and not stressing about, oh, now we're going to have to go right after. I think that would be really good. Thanks for sharing, Cindy, and allowing us to kind of critique in the moment and think about how you can give those directions. The other thing you might think about is like the student names. If you don't have them, you could put them up on the board and then just say, find your name up on the board. Group 1, you're going to go to this corner. Group 2. I also do like the wheel of names. I don't know if you've seen that, like the app, and it'll put them in randomizer, or you can pick names on this wheel as it goes. So to help do some grouping. So thanks for sharing, Cindy. I could give more tips, but we're going to go on for time here. Ashley, or is it John B?
Yeah, I can go next. All right. Knowing now about the differences between prejudice, stereotyping, and discrimination, let's apply this to psychological disorders. In other words, I'm inviting you to think about how these constructs manifest differently in relation to various disorders. To do this, let's do a think, pair, share activity in which I encourage you to write down how prejudice manifests, what stereotypes may be common, and how discrimination might manifest depending on your group's disorder. Quadrant 1 of the room will focus on PTSD. Quadrant 2 will focus on X. Quadrant 3, 4, Y, and Z. When I say go, you'll have 30 seconds to think independently on your own. After that, you'll have 1 minute to pair up with the others in your group in that quadrant. And then we will share broadly throughout the class. What questions do you have? Go ahead and begin your independent thinking for the next 30 seconds.
Great. I really appreciated how well you set the context at the start. Like, we just did this and now we're going to think about this. And sometimes maybe college students know what a think, pair, share is, but telling them that, but you could just say, you're going to think independently for 30 seconds, jot down as much as you can. All right, 30 seconds is up. Now find a partner. So then they're not stressed about that second part. Just depending on the student, sometimes they're already jumping ahead to being like, I'll just find a friend and start talking. So, but really good, Ashley, on thinking about how you set that context and getting ready. And then I liked how you divided the room up so that they're more focused on one thing. So thanks for sharing. All right, last but not least.
So yeah, I'll go next. As we have discussed in the last class about the AP style, we're going to start a class with a new activity. We are going to look at the 3 news articles that are on your table, and you will have to write down 3 things that you don't like about it and 1 thing that you like about it. When I say write, you will have 5 minutes to jot down the points. So, right.
Good, good. So you incorporated a lot of good things. I heard the timing in there, how many you wanted them to do. You were setting that context, that cognitive task, refreshing their memory. So really good. Yeah, and then what do they do after they finished? Was it like they just were sitting at their tables?
We will be discussing it after the 5 minutes. So
yeah, so they could, depending on how you're having them do this, like, when you're done, you can return to your seat or, prepare for a discussion, just depending on the layout of the room. Thanks for volunteering to share. I know we kind of all did that because there's such a small group, but hopefully those that watch this later will see how you can practice this and it becomes better. And there's still days where I struggle to do it really well. And then there's other lessons that I've taught enough that I'm like really efficient with the directions. But being cognizant of those 5 elements to designing and delivering are really important. So I do want to conclude my time here with just some more tips, because the directions that you give influence a lot of other things. And I would be remiss if I didn't just also highlight some other tips for teachers. So some literature I share with my students are these top 5 tips, and directions is number 5 on giving those effective directions. One of the things that we tend to do is talk too much. And as we give directions, really hone in on what's the most important things that they need to know. And that way that you stop talking and they get to work. So try to be really careful not to use too many words when you describe what you're wanting them to do. So you can see there just a quick example of just shortening up some things to be more aware of how much you're saying. Another one is economy of language. I talk to my students a lot about this, about, you know, what can we say in a way that just like gets to the point? And so sometimes this is with them teaching specific content, but also in giving directions. What's the best thing I can say in the least amount of words? The other thing we already talked about is this inclusivity and how we say the directions. Using let's and we really will help set the tone more than you are going to or I want you to. So if we can try to use that inclusive language, our classrooms will be really positive places for learning. The second one is pacing, and I kind of already hit on this, and you felt what 3 minutes felt like. The sharing went over, it took longer than 4 minutes. So one of my tips is if you're doing like me and putting directions up on like a PowerPoint or something visible, you can just leave like a little blank there, like an underlined blank, and you tell them verbally how much time you think. Remember, going shorter than you thought. Then you don't be held to, well, you said 8 minutes on the thing and we've only worked for 6. Like, where are 2 more minutes? The other thing is, you know, establishing that what's in it for me, that's that really important part of establishing like why you're having them do this. So, and you guys did that really well when we practiced just a minute ago. And then on the pacing, and you guys that have taught often, when group work is starting to peter out, there's going to be this crest of the wave. They'll start to get quiet because they're done working, but then maybe the wave will start to pick up because now they're talking about off-task things. So you have to kind of know when to be like, okay, we're done talking about productive things and we're going to move on. So it's just something to keep in mind is the pacing. And then finally, the modeling. If you're giving directions, and you don't want them to move yet, that's where that standing still really comes in. If you want them to raise their hands or if you want them to do something fun, if we model that. And of course, I'm training teachers, so all day long, I'm worried about how well am I modeling, so that we can hopefully showcase good, effective teaching, but our students are learning, which is at the end of the day is what's most important to me. And sorry, we didn't have time for everybody to share your directions. I called on those that had their videos on. And so just want to give reference that I see more people are here now without videos on. So last pieces of advice before I open it up for questions and maybe do some problem solving that you might have. Wait until you have full attention from all your students to give directions. And this is a challenge depending on the classroom environment. But if you can start to establish that, hey, I'm up here, I'm about to give some directions, we're going to listen before we start moving, then they're going to pay, hopefully, close attention to you giving those directions. State them loud enough that they can all hear, but don't yell. I have a very strong teacher voice, but I try to get my future teachers to recognize, like, there's a difference between using your teacher voice and yelling. And so how can we model that to our students that we're not going to yell at them, we're just going to raise it loud enough everybody can hear me, or use a microphone if you're in a classroom that has that. Make sure you have enough time to fully communicate the directions and answer any questions they may have. This is so hard for me because I like to teach the full time. I have to put in my lesson plans like time marks, so I know where I need to be at a certain time. And if I'm not there yet, I know I'm either going to have to get the pace moved up or I have more wiggle room at the end. So right before the bell is not the time to tell them really important information on an upcoming assignment. So if you can build in just a little bit more time to do that and answer all their questions. I already talked about this. Remember, give them shorter amount of time. You can be the graceful, you know, the teacher that grants them this extra time if they need it. And then train your students that it's okay to ask you questions for clarity, that you want them to ask you these questions, that you've built in that opportunity for them to ask you questions and to make sure that they understand what they are supposed to be doing. So just to summarize it, the directions we give for activities, assignments, those learning tasks are just as important as the activity itself. We want them to know what it is that you want them to accomplish and to have a positive learning experience with that. So as you leave today, either live or watching this later, I hope that you will push yourself to practice writing out those directions for key activities and assignments you're having your students do, and then practice communicating them. You'll start to pick up, oh, I didn't give them that time marker, or they're starting to move their bodies before I engage their brain. So you'll start to hopefully check yourself and how you're giving those directions. So thank you again for joining me today, allowing me to share a little bit of what I do with my own students in the classroom. And I do want to give a shout out, the book right here, it's an oldie but a goodie, but it is really good. Quantum Teaching is a book I still reference. A lot of the material from today came out of that. And then this is an older edition, but it was a book that was used at K-State before I got here, but now is a textbook for my teaching methods class, How the Brain Learns. And it is a really good read, written in a way that's very, very applicable and with good examples throughout. So my students all have to read that book and utilize it as they prepare to be educators. So thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Dr. Hock. Do we have any questions? Or what questions do we have? I'm sorry. What questions do we have?
There, good job. I'm going to go back to that, just the one slide here real quick. Are you noticing anything in your classroom, like at a collegiate standpoint, that you're like, I'm noticing students are doing this?
I think one of the things that I'm kind of having a little bit of a hard time with is a lot of this stuff, like I'm not talking about an active learning activity in class. I'm talking about the instructions for like a bigger assignment. I'll spend time at the onset when I give the assignment out. I'll give a lot of the instruction. I'll give a lot of the tips for success, the recommendations, the pitfalls to avoid. But it's not, as you mentioned, just in time, right? So it's 2 weeks later when they're working on that, they don't necessarily remember what I said, or they're distracted when I said it. They didn't encode it at that point. So I find it's hard for me to know the when to give the detail on those larger assignments when they're not going to immediately do that. So I wondered if you had any kind of insights about directions in those longer term assignments.
Yeah, we've struggled with that too, and we talked about it with my colleagues. We had students not starting projects that they should have been working on for like a month until Canvas showed that it was coming up due. And we're like, you cannot rely on Canvas. The other thing I'm noticing is that they're having a hard time chunking bigger types of assignments into manageable tasks. And instead they stress themselves out with, they have this big task. And I'm like, but you can chunk it down and accomplish these smaller things. So having those conversations with them about, you need to think about, of this bigger task, what can you accomplish in a shorter amount of time that'll move you forward, and helping to do that. So that's something all of us should be doing at K-State, is just helping our students learn how to prioritize their time and do some time management things. And that's not going away. I think all students still struggle with that. And then, yeah, the just-in-time thing is hard, but I think checking on them, there's been a couple assignments where I used to just let it be more open, and now I've chunked it. And so they have the first part due this week, they have a second part due, in a couple weeks, and then the third part, because they could not get it all done without a lot of extra questions and me having to reinforce things. So I had to just chunk that bigger assignment into smaller ones, was one way I had to handle it.
Sure. I appreciate that. And Cindy notes in the chat that students don't often take notes unless they're specifically instructed to do so. They access online content outside of class, but don't seem to realize the value of note-taking for learning, not just later access to information. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that process of taking notes, right, we have to process it in that moment. So I think that's a great point that Cindy makes.
Cindy, because I'm training high school teachers, I require them to think about like the guided notes or notes taking, like they're having their students do while they're teaching the content. And they're like, well, I'm just going to tell them to take notes. And I'm like, nope, they're not just going to take notes. So how are you structuring the lesson in a way that encourages them to take notes or to help point out things that they need to write down? I fear, and this might be a good one for the future, is the amount of students that are just using devices to do AI note taking and just recording what the professor is saying, are they actually going back in and reading those and spending time with those notes? Most of us probably went through where we had to just handwrite everything. There wasn't an option to have a phone record it and watch it back later. But I do think, Cindy, just blatantly telling them, you need to be taking notes. These are going to be helpful as you work on these assignments or these other tasks. But I'm in the same boat with you, and I'm training teachers that I have to really harp on them some days to be like, I really think you guys need to be writing down some more things. Like, how can we write? Sharing the PowerPoint slides is also a way to do that, but I struggle with that as well because then they just print those out and they don't really engage with them. So I think if we could do, what are some professors doing with some guided notes or more purposeful note-taking initiatives in their classes might be a good conversation for us to have. Social annotations. Thanks, Cindy.
So, Dr. Hock, we are about out of time. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for these really very practical and useful tips for us giving better directions to our students. So if everyone would please join me in thanking Dr. Hock, that was really, really informative. I really appreciate all the stuff that you're doing, especially training our teachers so that they'll do this in high schools and beyond.
Hopefully, yes.
I'd like to repeat some of my announcements from the beginning. I'll remind you that this is going to be archived, so point your colleagues to this. This was really excellent, interesting content. It'll be available for asynchronous viewing later on today. We also have more events. We have 2 more events this semester. Next week, we have the event given by Pradeep Malreddy on exam blueprints. The week after that, we have a teaching chat. We'll kind of debrief on some things toward the end of the semester. If you're looking for a professional development certificate or become a TLC fellow, we're accepting those applications. And that will be due on Friday, May 30th. So we got a minute for that, but maybe not as long as we think. And finally, remind you that our SOTO Showcase, our 4th annual SOTO Showcase, will be Monday, May 12th from 1:30 to 4:30 in Hale Library from Hale Library room 181. We have a great slate of oral presentations as well as poster presentations. This is an in-person event. It's our only in-person event. We will have the opportunity for people to watch the oral presentations on Zoom. The rest of the event is actually in person. So we're looking forward to seeing you all there. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to me. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you have a wonderful conclusion to your semester over the next couple of weeks.
And go Cats, right?